A dad on a mission. He lost his son in the Santa Barbara shooting. Now he wants Congress to help stop it from happening to your loved ones.
Islamist militants continue to sweep across Iraq today. I'm Wyatt Goolsby at the Pentagon. Just ahead, we'll have more on the end game for this terrorist group.
Under arrest. 2 years after the deadly U.S. Embassy attack in Libya, the Pentagon confirms a suspect is in custody. And the shot heard round the world, or at least in America. Team USA is off to a strong start in the World Cup. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 17th, 2014.
It's important for us to send a message to the world that when Americans are attacked, no matter how long it takes, we will find those responsible and we will bring them to justice.
Good evening, I'm Brian Patrick, and developments from the Middle East top our look at News Now, beginning with the first arrest in the 2012 deadly attack on the American consulate in Libya. Ambassador Chris Stevens, who you see here, died in the attack along with 3 other Americans. American officials say Ahmed Abu Khattala, a known militant, killed Stevens. He's been on the FBI and military's radar for quite a while. We're learning tonight that key members of Congress were just briefed on the details of the capture. The consulate attack happened in Benghazi, September 11th, 2012. President Obama says he authorized the operation to capture Khattala and plans to keep pushing to find the others responsible for that attack. Meanwhile, Pentagon spokesman Admiral John Kirby took on criticism about the 2 years it took to make an arrest.
You don't ever want to execute a mission like this, a complicated mission like this, that without having the proper information and resources all in place. And so what matters is not that it took a matter of time to get him, but that we got him.
The consulate attack marked the first time an American ambassador was killed abroad since 1979. So amid escalating violence, 275 American troops are going to Iraq now to help protect the embassy in Baghdad, as well as other U.S. interests there. The president has now notified Congress of this small deployment. The fighting appears to be far from over in Iraq. Islamic militants vowed to seize the capital of Baghdad. Our Wyatt Goolsby's at the Pentagon tonight with more on the terrorist group pushing Iraq into what appears to be an all-out civil war.
Yeah, Brian, military officials here in the U.S. have plenty to be worried about. This group is a breakaway from al-Qaeda and is not afraid in many ways to kill dozens of innocent people. Now, this really, for them, for many of the terrorists, really is seen as a wider battle that involves much more than just Iraq. Nearly every day, more violence from militants in Iraq. The masked fighters are known as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham, aka ISIS or ISIL. The group's sole focus is to create a single Sunni country out of Iraq and Syria.
And to you goes all the gratitude. This is the end of the Iraq-Syria borders. This is God's grace, what remains of any borders of Muslim land. Oh God, all our prayers belong to you.
In less than a week, ISIS has captured much of northern Iraq, including the cities of Mosul, Tikrit, and Fallujah. They've vowed to take Baghdad next. Counterterrorism strategist Sebastian Gorka says it's with good reason tens of thousands have fled.
If you are a Christian, if you are a Jew, if you do not surrender to the authority of the theocratic Sunni regime, the jihadi regime, you will be killed.
Gorka says Iraq as a unified country doesn't exist. Most of the fighting is between Sunni and Shia, some spilling over from Syria.
The fact is, without U.S. involvement, without a strengthening of the Iraqi government, the country will collapse, and there will be an increased threat to the United States from jihadists that are fighting there now but could come this way.
That same warning came from Secretary of State John Kerry, who spoke yesterday about the terrorist threat.
They clearly are focused not just there, but they're focused on trying to do harm to Europe, to America, and other people. And that's why we believe it is so important for us to be engaged and to be leading an effort to try to deal with this.
Secretary Kerry also says that the U.S. is willing to talk to Iran about the crisis in Iraq, but there's no definite timetable about when that could happen. In the meantime, President Obama is scheduled to meet with congressional leaders, bipartisan leaders, at the White House tomorrow. Brian?
All right, our Wyatt Goolsby at the Pentagon tonight, and Daniel Kochis from the Heritage Foundation is here to discuss our top stories. This Benghazi arrest is big news. What's your take on the timing of this?
Well, Brian, I'm willing to give the military planners the benefit of the doubt on the timing of the capture of the leader. But I take two big things from this. The first is that it's a good thing, and every American should be happy that the leader who organized the death of 4 Americans has been captured, and that we should take every sort of legal means within our arsenal to make sure that he and others are brought to justice. I also take from it the fact that the Obama administration's foreign policy, this house of cards, we're seeing it in Iraq, but we saw it in Benghazi, it's tumbling down across the world, and that is very troubling.
So now the Obama administration is sending 275 troops to protect the embassy in Baghdad. Do you think that was the lesson learned from Benghazi?
Well, hopefully. We certainly don't want to see a repeat of what happened in Benghazi, and I think that it's a good thing that there are troops being sent. But that's not going to, these are not combat troops, so that's not going to do anything to sort of establish any sort of breathing room for the Iraqi military to sort of push back the Islamic militants.
So you don't see this as a shift in policy on the administration's part?
I don't think that the administration is going to put any combat troops in the way. They're still sort of discussing potentially putting in airstrikes, but we haven't heard any sort of concrete plan, just that they're going to be sending these troops to protect the embassy.
This is a very measured response. Do you think it's appropriate to the situation?
No, I think, unfortunately, I don't think sending combat troops in is the correct answer, but potentially sending in some special ops who are able to set up the targets for any potential airstrikes. We certainly don't want to leave that necessarily to the Iraqi military. That might be able to put in some sort of breathing room. At the end of the day, when you walk away from a war, you don't end it. You need to just create this sort of sectarian violence in Iraq.
Daniel Kochis with the Heritage Foundation. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Brian.
We spoke earlier with the Syriac Catholic Patriarch of Antioch. He is the leader of one of the Eastern Catholic churches in union with Rome. And he said Christians in the Middle East are devastated by the sectarian violence in Iraq. And he took it a step further, saying, quote, "Now we are facing the most critical in the life of the Middle East because we can't convince our new generation to stay in their land and witness to the Lord." And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. We're getting mixed messages about who is behind a series of killings in Kenya. Extremists went on a murderous rampage, leaving some 60 non-Muslims dead. Al-Shabaab, which is a Somali group with ties to al-Qaeda, says it's behind the attacks. But the Kenyan president blames local political networks. Regardless of who's behind it, Kenya's president called the perpetrators hate mongers who create fanaticism. We're getting mixed messages. It was rather a royal occasion for the Premier of China, meeting Queen Elizabeth today, as well as British Prime Minister David Cameron. The Premier's visit aims to improve diplomatic relations between the countries, but it's been surrounded by some controversy. There are reports the Premier planned to cancel the trip unless he got an audience with the Queen. Things have cooled down since then. Prime Minister Cameron announced $23 billion worth of business deals between companies in those two countries. Here in the States, severe weather ravages part of America's heartland. A second death has now been linked to a storm that brought twin tornadoes to a tiny farming town northwest of Omaha, Nebraska. The local sheriff's office earlier said a 5-year-old girl was killed in the town of Pilger, and now say a driver died in a one-car crash as the storm pounded the area. The National Weather Service says the twisters touched down within about a mile of each other. And in Wisconsin, there is a risk of more severe weather today after a stormy night there. Strong winds packed a punch, damaging at least 15 homes and an elementary school. San Francisco's Archbishop is defending the upcoming March for Marriage this Thursday here in Washington. Archbishop Salvador Cordeleon says it is his duty to teach the truth about marriage even when it's unpopular. Some California politicians, including House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, recently criticized the Archbishop for joining in Thursday's march. But Cordeleone says we must reaffirm the right of children to grow up in a family with a father and a mother. And he adds the criticism is based on misinterpretation. In Rome, Pope Francis is again denouncing corruption. For the second consecutive day, his daily homily focused on corrupt politicians, business leaders, and even priests. He says their actions hurt the poor. His sharp criticism has been prompted by bribery scandals affecting public projects in Italy. And the Pope will be slowing down a little bit this summer. The Vatican says the Holy Father will hold no Wednesday general audiences during the month of July. Those popular gatherings for the faithful will resume the first week of August. Also, the Pope's morning Mass will be suspended from early July until the end of August. The Vatican usually invites employees and some lucky visitors to attend that Mass celebrated at the Pope's residence. We'll show you more about what the Pope did today a little bit later on. Meanwhile, the Vatican will be honoring 2 scholars with a special prize. Church leaders announced that Anne-Marie Pelletier of France and Monsignor Waldemar Krostowski will receive the Ratzinger Prize. Cardinal Camillo Ruini told EWTN News Nightly why they were chosen.
We thought of giving the award to a woman, something we had never done before. And secondly, we wanted to give the award to a Polish academic because Poland is an important nation for the Catholic Church.
The Ratzinger Foundation, also known as the Pope Benedict XVI Foundation, is a charitable organization that promotes theology in the spirit of Joseph Ratzinger. Not one more child killed by guns. Victims' families rallied in Washington today. Our Jason Calvi was there, and he has that story. Jason?
Brian, think of the litany of places touched by mass shootings. Newtown, Tucson, Virginia Tech, Aurora, and now Santa Barbara. Today, families of those murdered in those tragic places took their message to Washington. They're urging Congress to pass gun reforms, including mandating that federal background checks before someone can buy a gun.
Richard Martinez's first Father's Day without his son Chris.
I was really proud of him, but he was proud of me too. We talked to kids about us and our relationship, and it was really, we had a very close relationship.
A relationship forever changed 26 days ago. Chris was gunned down in a Santa Barbara mass shooting. Richard met the shooter's father this month.
Everywhere, people are supportive of me. They offer condolences. That doesn't happen with that family. You know, who's going to offer them condolences, feel sorry for them? And they feel terrible.
Richard and other loved ones of those who no longer have a voice stand united today.
We never hear the phrase, I can't imagine what it's like.
Yes.
Because we all know what it's like.
Lonnie and Sandy Phillips' daughter Jessica was murdered in an Aurora, Colorado movie theater.
My heart continues to break every time we hear another story.
Richard Martinez's passion has motivated these families to continue to turn their tragedies into action.
Well, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and at certain points in the race you get tired.
But the ongoing national push to require background checks has failed. Today, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said it would be good to bring this issue up for a vote.
Well, I feel very strongly about this, but we need some more votes.
So Peter Reid continues lobbying Congress. His daughter Mary was killed in the Virginia Tech shootings in 2007.
There's always that hole in your heart. It's shaped like your lost child. For me, it's shaped like Mary, and that never goes away.
They want their words and action to ring louder than the gunshots.
I just want it to change. I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. This is awful.
And the U.S. Bishops' Conference has lobbied on gun control measures. Back in 2000, they put out a document on crime and justice referencing that issue. And after Newtown, they called on Congress to pursue some gun control measures, including universal background checks, limiting high ammunition guns, making gun trafficking a federal crime, and improving mental health resources. And Brian, an official at the U.S. Bishops' Conference, tells me that he even met with the Vice President Biden to talk about this issue.
Not one more powerful message. Thank you, Jason. Coming up, as the Bishop of Rome, Pope Francis meets with the leaders of his diocese. And Italian judges reap papal wisdom as they meet with the Holy Father. Pope Francis using his Twitter account today to advocate for the elderly, saying, "Sometimes we cast the elderly aside, but they are a precious treasure. To cast them aside is an injustice and an irreparable loss." Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and Pope Francis spent time today with faithful from his Diocese of Rome. He greeted the crowds who were taking part in a meeting on pastoral care. He kissed another lucky baby. The Pope also visited several parishes in his diocese, highlighting his role as Bishop of Rome. The Holy Father described the Church as a mother who knows how to raise her children. The Pope also received Italian judges today at the Vatican. He expressed his esteem to the group, urging them to be an example of moral integrity for society. Back here in the States, GOP leaders are moving forward after last week's political shakeup. Republican Dave Brat unseated Majority Leader Eric Cantor in last week's primary in Virginia. Cantor steps down from his leadership role July 31st. So this Thursday, House Republicans vote on a new majority leader. California's Kevin McCarthy is expected to win. Time Magazine's Elizabeth Dias is with us tonight. And how do you think Thursday's election of a new majority leader will go?
Well, I think you're right to expect that Kevin McCarthy will probably win out. However, there's a couple challengers, and one we wrote about this week was Representative Labrador out of Idaho, and he's unseated and pushed against establishment to push the Tea Party agenda in the past. So we'll see if he can gather enough votes, but otherwise it's looking like McCarthy.
I was intrigued by your Time Magazine article about Dave Brat. He attends Mass with his wife, who's a Catholic, in Richmond. But this guy has a lot of religious affiliations, or maybe none at all.
Right, he does. He, according to his CV, he lists 4 different church affiliations: Catholic, Episcopal, Methodist, and Presbyterian. He went to Hope College, Christian college up in Michigan, and did seminary, an MDiv degree actually at Princeton Theological, which is a Presbyterian USA school, and then has spent time writing recently a lot about Calvinism and the way that he thinks Calvinist ideas impact capitalism and how the government should be run.
I would be confused, I think, if I were him with all that background. But he says that capitalism and Christianity need to merge. What does he mean by that?
Well, I think he's really meaning that people need to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. And this idea that you have a very strong Protestant work ethic, stemming back really to some of our founding ideas theologically that came to the United States during the Protestant Reformation, and applying them to today's very different socioeconomic circumstances.
But don't you think that puts him at odds with Pope Francis? I mean, he goes to a Catholic church. Pope Francis has talked about how capitalism often harms the poor.
He does, yeah. He's even called it a tyranny. His main concern, as you say, is what the capitalist system, not necessarily individuals, but what the entire system does to the poor and the impact that that can have. So he's been very bold speaking out against that. So the idea that Dave Brat is in a Catholic congregation, but yet the leader of the entire Catholic world is opposing him is something to take note of.
Briefly, how much do you think Brat is influenced in his policy and his whole politics by his moral views?
Well, according to all of his writings that we've been seeing, he's a professor, so he does a lot of writing, and he seems to draw political opinions and assertions really from theological perspectives. So I think it's something to take seriously when he says, people should educate themselves out of poverty and out of debt, and seeing what that might mean in a recession, this kind of thing, we have to take seriously.
It will be interesting to see how the voters look at that in November. Elizabeth Dias, thanks for joining us from Time Magazine.
Thank you for having me.
Well, an archbishop whose face we know from television is one step closer to sainthood tonight. A Vatican commission unanimously agrees that a reported miracle should be attributed to Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. Of course, reruns of Sheen's 1950s popular television show are seen here on EWTN. This miracle involves a baby who showed no signs of life and was considered stillborn. The parents and other loved ones began seeking the intercession of Fulton Sheen, and the baby came to life. The miracle will now be presented to Pope Francis, and if the Holy Father concurs, Bishop Sheen will be beatified in Peoria, Illinois, near his birthplace. A TV executive is following the example of Bishop Sheen in a way. He's focusing his channel's programming on positive content, and it's been successful. Our Susie Pinto has the story for us.
Well, I remember 18 years ago, our youngest son, Charlie, was born.
Charlie Humbard grew up the son of famous TV evangelist Rex Humbard, singing with his siblings on his dad's TV show. He parlayed his broadcasting skills into becoming a successful TV executive at Discovery Channel. Then 9/11 happened.
For me, it was a life-changing event. It was a chance to stop and really think about our lives, our faith, our families.
He quit his job near Washington to move closer to family in Atlanta.
If you're unemployed or you change your jobs or whatever, you have that moment to really say, what could I do next? What could I do that's meaningful?
So Humbard launched the gospel music channel 10 years ago into 2,700 homes. Last June, the TV channel rebranded, becoming the Up Network, now reaching almost 70 million households with its inspirational programming.
In 2009, my home was in foreclosure, so I set a goal to bake 100 cakes in 10 days.
Angela Logan runs her own bakery and knows firsthand the power of positive programming.
The Up Network did a TV movie about my story, and we've gotten calls from all over the nation from people talking about how much they are inspired by the story.
The channel is also attracting the attention of stars wanting more meaningful roles.
At this point in my career, a lot of times it's not about the money anymore, it's about the material.
Up TV credits word of mouth for its growing popularity.
And for me, it was about choosing something that had instant impact and also eternal impact.
An uplifting vision now shared by millions.
Maybe today isn't a red letter day, but someone's always got it worse than you.
Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, sweet revenge. Twice, Ghana has knocked the U.S. out of World Cup competition, but not this year. And a prayer for a win. Fans of the Mexican team, including an archbishop, have been fervently praying. On Wednesday, June 17th, thank you for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Remembering Watergate, today marks the 42nd anniversary of an event that shook the nation's trust in its government. On June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested for breaking in to Democratic National Committee headquarters. The burglars were caught bugging the offices in Washington, D.C.'s Watergate complex and trying to steal documents. They were eventually linked to a group supporting Richard Nixon's re-election. We still don't know if Nixon knew about the plan at the time. The ensuing cover-up, however, became a national scandal, eventually leading to Nixon's resignation. It was the tenacious reporting of the Washington Post's Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein that brought the truth to light. Woodward met his key source, FBI agent Mark Felt, known at the time as Deep Throat, in this Northern Virginia parking garage. It's a piece of history that won't be around much longer, though. There are plans now to tear it down to make room for a grocery store and housing. KFC is apologizing after a family is kicked out of one of its restaurants. A customer claims she was told others were offended by her granddaughter's injuries. Kelly Bullen says a KFC employee told her that she and her granddaughter, Victoria, had to leave. Victoria is recovering from a vicious pit bull attack that has seriously scarred the little girl's face. The employee said the girl's appearance was upsetting customers. The family is devastated.
She usually says hi to everybody. She was never shy. Now, she don't say anything to anybody. She'll say hi to kids, but other adults or anything, she just kind of shies away from.
KFC has offered $30,000 to help with the girl's medical bills while issuing an apology to that family. 2 soccer powerhouses are facing off today in the World Cup. This has been a big prayer intention for some Mexican Catholics. They prayed for their team last night. In Mexico City's historic cathedral, Cardinal Norberto Rivera celebrated Mass. One of the prayers of the faithful was for members of the Mexican soccer team that they play fairly and spread a message of fraternity to all nations, and I'm sure some prayed that they would win. And north of the border, World Cup fever is sweeping the United States now more than ever after Team USA's first win against Ghana. U.S. fans were screaming with revenge Monday after the U.S. beat the Ghana Black Stars, who eliminated the Americans from the last 2 World Cups.
And I had tears early on, and then when they scored, my heart dropped. And when the USA scored again, I didn't know what to think. I was shocked. I didn't know. I'm still in shock that we won.
The U.S. defeated Ghana 2-1, but it came at a steep price. Starter Yossi Altidore went out of the game with a hamstring injury. Team captain Clint Dempsey injured his nose in a fight for a header, and defender Matt Beasler went out with a strained hamstring. Dempsey would draw first blood of the game with an early goal, and John Brooks put it away by heading in a corner kick. Ghana's only goal of the game came from Andre Ayew after a brilliant back heel pass. Now the Americans are in good position in Group G after Germany trounced Portugal earlier in the day. Fan predictions of what happens next are varied, but most believe Team USA's momentum will carry them forward.
Ghana and Portugal are dead.
That's it.
That's it, man. Portugal had their key defender red card, another guy hurt. Josie's gonna come back. We're gonna bury him in Manaus.
Germany's going to go through, and we are going to crush Portugal, and we're going through. That's what's happening.
Odds favor advancement with the U.S. win, but it depends on which players Jurgen Klinsmann can field for Sunday's game against Portugal in the hot and humid Amazon rainforest capital of Manaus. And I suppose it's okay to pray for a win. Well, thanks for watching tonight and every weeknight. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can watch again anytime you like on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night and God bless you.